I be Ruth. I reached out to Never Second, having spoken to Will, my coach, a bit about his experience with them. I was impressed by their science-driven approach to nutrition. I am definitely a bit of a data geek at times, so actually being able to look at their kind of various research papers in terms of some of that scientific research they've done, I thought was really great. And the fact that they were open-minded to getting some feedback from their athletes, and that they kind of wanted to work with athletes that would kind of help them build some of those products going forward. Nutrition is obviously one of the biggest parts of triathlon, especially as you get to the longer distances. Never Second kind of have a philosophy that really aligns to a lot of what I believe in as well, in terms of like very scientific, they look at clinically proven things that have been tested over and over again to make sure that it works across different people, and the science behind what they're trying to do makes sense. For example, with their range of carb drinks, they've increased that in kind of 30-gram increases of carbs. They've found through all the testing that they've done that kind of makes the difference between how much carbs you need. I like that they are a kind of newer brand, that they're trying to disrupt the market a little bit, but that because they're a newer brand, I think there's more opportunity to work with them, give them some feedback on their products to kind of say, actually, this really worked for me. Could we look at tweaking it in this way? With some of the big races like Kona, where nutrition is so important, actually being able to have that dialogue with a brand about what works for you or what doesn't is really important. The chocolate whey protein is pretty good, but I don't often take protein. Actually, I generally try and get it from food, so that would only be after like a very hard run or if I'm a bit short on time. So actually, I'd say my favourite product is the C90. It's what I use the most for my sort of either longer sessions or general interval sessions, and that's what I'm going to be fueling my racing with. There'll be a lot of practice coming up with it. 2022 main goals are St George World Championships and Kona World Championships. Two big World Champs races this year, both over the Ironman distance. Both will be my first pro World Championships. I've actually raced Kona before 3 times as an age grouper, but never as a pro, so I think that's going to feel very different. And I think St George actually being the first time the World Champs has been held in a different place is really exciting and brings a lot of unknowns into it because the course is different. As long as I can put together a good performance at those 2 races, I'll be really happy. So I think nutrition's so important, especially for the iron distance races, because it has such an impact on your race because you're out there for so long. I actually did my first Ironman in Lanzarote in 2017, and I'd kind of read about carb loading and all these kind of things, and I definitely just went a bit overboard on my carb loading. I think I tried to have like 300 grams of carbs like the day before, which for someone of my size is probably not needed. Just went wrong from the off. Like, I was sick in the sea, I was sick on the bike, I was having to run to every single Portaloo I could find on the run. That was an experience of nutrition going very badly wrong. And then on the flip side, I think, when it works well, you just feel fueled throughout the whole performance. Like my Kona performance in 2019, I just felt strong pretty much all the day until the last 10k of the run, which I think even the people that get it absolutely bang on, you're still a bit tired by the time you get to there. So a lot of trial and error of playing around with nutrition, but that's why for me it's important to work with a brand that are happy to listen to my input. There's definitely been a lot of learning points from turning pro. One of them is actually recovery is so important, in particular sleep. And I think around that, generally how you fuel yourself. I think as an age grouper, I kind of got away with it a bit more from the fact of not necessarily fueling sessions properly. You know, I'd quite often be up in the morning and just go and do a session without any kind of fueling, where I found now that if I've got a key session, like if I fuel for it, sounds really obvious, but obviously it goes better. But yeah, it's the little things. It's, you know, like actually getting on top of gym work and mobility and sleep is probably the biggest things where I've seen improvements come from. Obviously having a bit more time to train also helps, but actually like I've not increased my hours massively. I have had some weeks been bigger, but the main thing I've learned is it's not like one big thing that you change or that is massively different. It's kind of lots of little things that add up to then make that difference. Nutrition is key to training and racing. I think from a training perspective, recovery and where you actually get your gains from, like obviously when you're training, you're damaging your muscles, you need the right fuel to repair them, build them, get them stronger. So from that perspective, it's obviously key. Anyone who's trained slightly hungry or has been on a ride where you've run out of food, you know how much of an impact that has on kind of how you feel and how that session goes. So definitely important from a keeping fueled throughout the sessions as well. And then racing wise, you know, it's the make or break of a long distance triathlon. If you get it wrong, you're either not going to finish or you're not going to have a great race. Whereas if you get it right, that can be the difference between kind of fairly average race and actually being on the podium. I was a music scholar at school. So have apparently some other creative talent. Play the cello and the French horn. It's super cool. I was top of everyone's cool list. Not really a secret to anyone that has followed me, but I am a massive chocoholic. I don't think you get that many pro triathletes that are as addicted to chocolate as I am. Everything in moderation. Don't just eat chocolate, it won't go well for you. My nickname when I was quite young, it was Gordon, after Gordon Brown. When I used to get grumpy, I used to pull a bit of a face that apparently looked like Gordon Brown. Yes, I think from an overall nutrition perspective, for me, it's actually just all about balance. I think there's got to be, you know, points where you're doing things out of ease. So I'd say, for example, like most mornings I have porridge for breakfast, partly because I really like it, but partly because it's really easy and it's quick. In terms of eating properly around training, it would usually be to kind of eat something before. So I'd say if I'm going out on the bike, probably like eggs on toast with a bit of avocado would be my standard lunch. And then eating something when I got back, like probably a little snack because it's probably not quite dinner time. Depending on the length of the ride, like if it's a long ride, like I will take either a bit of carb drink or I will have a cafe stop somewhere and have a cake. Depends a bit on the day and at what stage of training I'm at. Most of the time it's about having proper food kind of before and after sessions. I think it's important to be cooking as much as possible. So you know what's going into your food. Also, but I quite like that process of cooking because then you're generally having like proper whole food that hasn't been processed in many different ways. As I said, I'm a bit of a chocoholic, so I quite often have some chocolate every day. But it's obviously balancing that with everything else that I'm doing. The overall piece of the kind of like calories in versus calories out, but also I think generally as long as like 90% of your food is pretty good and wholesome, it doesn't actually matter too much if you have that little bit of wine and chocolate to balance it out. Mainly about balance. I'd say with training, a lot of my focus training is actually on fueling with proper food and then using my kind of race nutrition in very specific sessions. For example, I had like a long bike going into a run last weekend and I used race nutrition for that. So generally I like to fuel stuff off, I'd say like proper, you know, like cooked food, because I think generally your body recovers a bit better from that without having the big sugar spikes. But I think It's also very important to be training your body to what you're going to be racing with. A, to make sure that it works for you. B, to make sure you know exactly how much to have and how that plays out over the course of the kind of length of time you're on the bike and on the run. For me, it's a bit of a mix. I'd say probably like 20% of the time I'm using like race nutrition to practice that and kind of make sure I know exactly what I'm doing with it and anything that I need to refine from that race nutrition strategy. But yeah, 80% of the time would just be off normal, proper cooked food.